I read so many books this month. Hi, hey there, welcome back to my channel. It's Emma. I'm gonna try to make this not 3 hours long because I haven't had a wrap up quite like this one in a very long time. I read 16 books this month, which is crazy for me. That hasn't happened in a really long time. I just fell back in love, like so much so, with reading. And April was also the month for me of a massive anxiety spike. So the data speaks for itself. Okay, first of all, to get these books out of the way, because you probably already know what they are. I released a very long vlog talking about this whole series. So I finished up the Shatter Me series by Alharu Bride. So I read, you know what? I'm not even gonna go in order because it's just so confusing. I read Find Me, a collection of 2 novellas, Restore Me, Defy Me, Imagine Me, which is the last full novel, and Believe Me, which finally concludes the whole series with the most hideous cover of them all. So I kind of regret reading the second half of the Shatter Me series. This is a young adult dystopian where we follow Juliet. She has the power to make you feel immense pain whenever she touches you. And because of this, she's kind of been put into an asylum, but eventually she's taken out by the dystopian overlords called the Reestablishment, who want to use her for their own nefarious purposes. The series ends, and years later, Alharu Bride put out a whole bunch more of these books. What she did is just like kind of undermine everything, go underneath everything, change all of your expectations, change the characters themselves, disappear some characters, put so many characters off page. Juliet, I want to argue, isn't even really a central character in the later books, which like she is, but she is so... I'm not going to spoil anything, but if you want the full spoilers, the full montage, the full rant, you can go watch my 1 hour and 41 minute video on the series. Suffice it to say, I did not have a good time. The first 3 books I really like because they're very nostalgic, they're very funny, they're very cringy, and they really just make you laugh. I was laughing the whole time, I was having a good time. These books, no. They took the heart out of the Shatter Me series. Like I said, they rearranged so many events. They have so many tropes that are so just cliche, and they make everything meaningless, such as memory wiping, characters coming back from the dead, invincibility, like you name it, everything has been pushed too far to the point of nothing's enjoyable, nothing means anything because everything can happen, stakes don't seem as high, consequences don't seem to last, and the characters ultimately are reduced to these people we don't even know anymore, when like I at least felt like I knew the people in the Shatter Me original trilogy and even liked a few of them. Kenji and Warner, I'm looking at you. Where did you guys go? Overall, I think I gave every single one of these 4 books, 5 books, yep, I can count, 2 stars, unfortunately. That is the Shatter Me series. It's over. Yeah. Moving on. Let's move on to another dystopian that absolutely blew it out of the water, and that is Blindness by Saramago. I thought Blindness was really fantastic. First of all, this is a gift from Myra. Thank you so much for sending this book to me. I really liked it. I highly recommend the audiobook experience. That's how I listened to this one. And this is a dystopian set in a world where everyone, it's set in our world, where everyone goes blind, but it's a white blindness. It's called the epidemic of white blindness. It spares no one except for one person, which we'll get to, but essentially you just see blinding white. This starts to spread. We follow a bunch of people. The narration in this book I think is fantastic. It's set from 3rd person, and it just, I don't know, it's so eerie, it's so spooky, but it's so spectacular. So we follow a bunch of people. We follow the first few people that start to go blind, and eventually it starts to spread because it is, you know, catchable. When you're near someone who has gone blind, you are going to go blind within a matter of hours or days. The government gets a whiff of this. They're like, we need to put a stop to this right this very second. So they start sending out vehicles, ambulances to people's houses who either have gone blind or who have been in contact with those who have gone blind. They round them up and they send them away to these hospitals where they're like, you know what, we're going to take care of you. We're just going to put you in quarantine for a little bit. We're going to send you some medicine, some food, and we're going to try to sort this out. In reality, these places are just asylums, like huge buildings that have been converted to just house these people. They're not given what they need. Soldiers guard these buildings around the clock, and it inside eventually becomes ultimate mayhem. So on the back, like I said, there is one person who for some reason evades going blind, and it is a doctor's wife. So the doctor, he's actually an eye doctor. Ironically enough, he has gone blind, but his wife hasn't. And so she becomes this one person in this world who can see what's going on. That's kind of all I'm going to say about it because there's so much more that happens in this book. I've heard nothing but praises for Saramago for so long, and they are 100% correct. The writing in this is so gripping. Like, it's really telling a story that you just want to sit down and listen to. You don't want to get up, you don't want to move, you just want to hear what happens. It's very violent, very disturbing, so know that if you're going into it, there's a lot of violence that happens in this world once everyone has gone blind, and it does descend into some type of chaos. Some people are trying to create order. There's a lot going on, and there is also a sequel that I really want to read now. I thought this was kind of a standalone, and you can read it as a standalone, and also it smells fantastic. Like, it smells so good. I'm sorry, this one smells really good. It's a parable of loss, disorientation. Good, so good. That is Blindness. Next up, I'm just gonna grab at random here. We have, this is in no particular order. The books are scattered everywhere. We have a play that I read for my Indigenous Lit course, and that is The Res Sisters by the gloss. So The Res Sisters is a play about a group of women who all live on a reservation on Manitoulin Island in Ontario, in Canada, and they play bingo kind of obsessively. This play does center around bingo, the game. Women are all basically dreaming of a better life, a way to either improve their lives on the reservation or get off the reservation entirely. So one day when they hear that there's going to be the world's biggest bingo, the biggest bingo game ever that has ever been played in the world, and it's happening in Toronto, they're like, we need to get to Toronto no matter what it takes. So the play basically follows them doing as much as they can, raising enough money, trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to get there? Who's going to drive? Like, how can we get to this bingo game in order to hopefully get a seat and maybe have the opportunity to win a bunch of money and change our lives. Each of them have something different, a different goal, a different wish that they want to accomplish if they do win said winnings. It's very funny. Thompson Highway is so funny, but like there's so much tragedy in that comedy, and also amidst the comedy, like, you'll be reading, there's so much back and forth, there's so much banter, they annoy each other to no end, but they're also supportive of each other to no end. All of this yelling at each other, suddenly there'll be some like horrific truth inserted, and it's just like, it just takes you out of the moment, and you're like, oh my god, like, these are the true stakes. This is what they're playing for. As The Res Sisters, I personally don't like reading plays. I would much rather go and see the play performed because, you know, plays are meant to be watched. Very impressive production, and if it ever comes and is performed anywhere, I would definitely go see it. So that is The Res Sisters. Okay, let me just get this one out of the way because I need to get this out of the way, dear God. I finally finished David Copperfield. Can I get a round of applause? This was the bane of my existence and the object of none of my desires. Yeah, David Copperfield, what happened? Like, I'm really struggling to know what happened. I love Dickens. I really like Charles Dickens. I'm a Dickens girl. I really love so much of his work. David Copperfield, for whatever reason, did not work for me at all. I hated David. I did not like David. I never wanted to follow David. I never asked to follow David. I don't want to be in his shoes. David Copperfield is arguably, and I think Charles Dickens even said so, the most, autobiographically similar portrayal, is that even the right way to say that, to Charles Dickens' own life. It's just his initials swapped, and you go from David's childhood. He's very young, he has a very close connection with his mother, and their servant, Miss Peggotty, who I did like. I like Miss Peggotty. There were some characters in here that tried their best to salvage the book for me, didn't quite make it, but I still really appreciate them, and Miss Peggotty is one of them. Unfortunately, David's mother begins a relationship with this really awful man named Mr. Murdstone. And he comes in, he changes the whole household, he sends David away to school, and he basically just bullies David's mother into submission to the point of illness. I actually really liked the earlier parts of this novel. I liked the parts with Murdstone. I at least felt something in those sections when David is so young, growing up, being abused. He's sent to this school, which again comments on the nature of these schools that Dickens is so known to write. He's known to write so much commentary on like the state of these schools, how boys were treated, what really went on in these places. The school that David is sent to is definitely much more of a better place than people like Oliver Twist or who else? Nicholas Nickleby, you know, where they get sent to. But I think because I have been reading Dickens chronologically for about, has it already been 2 years? So much of this book has just felt like copy paste from so many of his other novels. I'm tired of it. It's getting so same. It's getting so much the same, and I don't want that anymore. I don't want to follow this young boy who inevitably is or becomes an orphan and goes through pretty much not the exact same struggles, but very, very similar life circumstances. And you ultimately, I feel like you always know where it's going to end. The plot twists are very similar as well, and I just got so bored of the same thing. On top of that, in David Copperfield, I love Dickens a lot because of the way that he writes. I don't know why I feel this way. I feel like in David Copperfield there was some kind of switch up of Dickens' writing style that varies so much, especially from his last novel prior to David Copperfield, which was Dombey and Son, which I really loved. I was not expecting to like Dombey and Son. I loved Dombey and Son. It was so poetic, it was so funny, there were very cool Dickensian things. Like, that's the whole thing. I feel like I love his writing because it's so colorful, it's so unique. He characterizes so much of that furniture. He gives life to furniture, to buildings, to clothes, the way that he describes things. I just fall in love with it every single time, but this did not have that charm factor, in my opinion, at all. I don't know where it went. I'm wondering if it's maybe because this was the most real story to him, the most personal, he did away with those more fabulous things in his writings because he didn't need them, because this one was meant to be so raw and vulnerable and maybe the most real of his works. I don't know. Once David escapes the clutches of the Murdstones, he does go to school. He eventually runs away. He finds his aunt living in the countryside. His aunt, Miss Trotwood, was also one of the characters who I adored. I also really like Steerforth. Steerforth is an iconic character that he meets at school, and he's obsessed with Steerforth. I wanted this to turn into a love story between David and Steerforth, because at least Steerforth was interesting. David is the portrait of passivity and ignorance, naivete. That's what it's supposed to be about, because this is a coming of age novel. You follow him from innocence to experience. Does he ever reach experience? I don't know. The whole book, I just wanted to whack him over the head with anything in the vicinity to just whack some sense into this man. He is so passive. He lets everything happen to him. He asks from the first page, am I going to be the hero of my own life, or will that station be fulfilled by someone else? Totally someone else. In my opinion, David is almost, he's useless. This one Goodreads review is like one of the top ones because it's so wonderful, where it's like David is the villain of David Copperfield because of his passivity. He just lets things happen, and because of that he disappoints and hurts so many people around him. But yeah, I'm really tired of reading about characters like that. I'm just like, take some goddamn agency, do something. And it is, of course, set from David years later, looking back at his life, telling us about it, and regretting a lot of things he did, or most of the time didn't do. Overall, I stopped caring. I'm like, David, I don't want to listen to you anymore. I want you gone. I want you out of my life. I want the story set from Steerforth. I know. This story could just be cut down to Steerforth, Ham, Miss Peggotty, Miss Trotwood, Dick, and is there anyone else? Anyone else? Just the main thing, just cut David out of David Copperfield. That was my problem. That was one of my biggest problems with this book. So now that I've got through this monster, I don't even feel accomplished because I didn't even like it. So I'm a little upset about this one. Unfortunately, I really just wanted to give it 2 stars, but I feel like I have to give it something a little bit higher than that because I do see its merits, but in terms of like my enjoyment of the book, which is mostly how I rate a book because like it's my own subjective experience, this does 100% get a 2-star. But I did bump that rating up to like 2.75 or something, so That's David Copperfield. So I think what I'm gonna do is just briefly talk about our other Game of Thrones book, because we read David Copperfield and Catcher in the Rye for the Game of Thrones book club, which I host with my best friend Carolyn. I love this. I'm not going to talk too much about this because we still have our live show coming up for like our little discussion about the two. So we chose The Catcher in the Rye as a compliment to David Copperfield because it's also coming of age. It's quite different, but also the first sentence of The Catcher in the Rye mentions David Copperfield. And all of that David Copperfield kind of crap, which ended up being true for me. So I loved Catcher in the Rye. I think this is a really solid piece of work. This follows Holden Caulfield. He gets a really bad rap. I don't think he deserves it. This is a story about deep trauma, really deep trauma that affects your everyday life to the point that you break down, you can't function any longer. Holden at the beginning of the story is like, you know what, I'm gonna tell you my story. He's talking to someone. Who is he talking to? You get to the end of the book and you realize who he's talking to, who he's writing this for, and it's not for you, it's not for the reader. Even if, I mean, it's for a reader. Anyway, that's all I'm gonna say. But at the beginning of the story, Holden is kicked out of, again, another very fancy, prestigious school, all-boys school, I think, that he's been attending. He's flunked out, and it's not because he's not intelligent, it's not because he's not smart, it's because he can't. He comes from a very wealthy, upper class, good background. His father's a lawyer. He has it pretty good. It's also set in New York. The story is set over like, I think literally 3 days, 2 or 3 days, of him like running away from the school because he's been kicked out, but he doesn't want to go home because he doesn't want his parents to know that he's been kicked out yet. He wants them to be able to digest this news before he arrives and they scream at him yet again, because this is like the upteenth time that this has happened. So he's bopping around New York City, incredibly lonely. It's also filled with the absolute angst of your teenage years. He's specifically like 15, 16, 17, that age range, and him just being angry at the world, thinking that everything is fake, that every single person is phony. He makes so many points. I think he makes so many points. I really related to him, and it's the kind of feeling that you feel so alone, especially as a young person, when like adults speak to you the way that they do or treat you the way that they do. He's sick of the city, he's sick of people. Like I said, he tries to make all these connections when he's in New York City. Like he calls out people like friends of friends. He's really trying to make like an intimate, genuine connection with someone, and none of them work out. They always disappoint him. They always are. They're fake. They're just fake. They are. Holden's right. They are phony. But it's very disheartening. It's very depressing. I think what gives him a bad rap is obviously his opinions about women. It's not a great time, let me tell you. Catcher in the Rye is like a deep, it's just a wound. Oh my god, these 3 days in his life that he's narrating to us, it's like his spiral. He is so depressed, and we learned that within the first few pages. He's really suffering from grief over the death of his younger brother Ali, who died of cancer, and it's not been treated. The story is also set in the 1950s, and it deals with the alienation, this young boy walking around New York City, one of the busiest cities in the world, feeling so alone. I don't hate Holden. I'm not annoyed with him. I feel so goddamn bad for him to take a sentence out of his own vocabulary. I think the writing was wonderful. It's so funny amidst all of this grimy grief, and it's great. It's so great. I gave this 4 stars. I'm thinking of bumping it up even further. I got to the last page of this book and I was smacked in the face, because you kind of forget the first page of the book by the time you get to the last page of the book, and then you're like, oh my god. I cannot wait to talk about it more with all of you during the live show. So that's Catcher in the Rye. Next up, an audiobook that I listened to is So Happy For You by Celia Lasky. Okay, this is a book where the concept I was obsessed with, I adored, and the execution unfortunately made the book come out at 2.5 stars. So Happy For You is set in a not so distant United States of America, where people aren't really getting married anymore. It's built on the trends of things that are already happening right now. Marriage is going down. I guess divorce is still going up. I don't really know the stats right now, but it's set in a world where more and more people are choosing not to get married, and because of this breakdown of like the familial unit, not as many people are moving to the suburbs. Business is collapsing, certain things are collapsing, and the government's like, oh my god, no, capitalism shan't go away. And so what do? They basically bolster the marriage market. It's become like a kind of a government run thing. There's an app that everyone is on that determines your rottenness, like when you're deemed rotten. That's kind of the last level that you can be, and it's based on your age. So there's a big push for people to get married as young as they can, pop babies out as many as they can, and obviously make themselves and their babies buy as many things as they can. Cars, houses, you know the deal. Suburbia. Amidst all of this, we have our narrator, Robin. Don't like her. Didn't like anyone in this book. Everyone in this book is awful. Robin, she's a lesbian. She has a partner. She's very happy. Does not want to get married. Doesn't subscribe to it at all. Thinks marriage is a garbage institution. That's why I was excited to read this book, because I really wanted a commentary on marriage in kind of our contemporary society. I really wanted this to be focused a lot on the finance, the economy of the marriage market, and specifically of weddings. This book was supposed to be focused a lot on weddings because Robin gets asked to be the maid of honor for her best friend since childhood, even though there's a huge rift between them. Robin's working on her PhD, and her PhD is also on the government's involvement in weddings in the United States. So very interesting. I thought this was going to really focus on weddings, the wedding aspect, how ridiculous a lot of things are, and it does. I was really happy with the parts of this book that provided a lot of historical background, because there's a lot that like I just didn't know about weddings, like where all these traditions come from, who's doing them, and you get to see that a lot of traditions like the bridal shower, gift registry, blah blah blah, they just originate from companies who want you to spend as much money as possible so that they get as much money as possible. Those elements of the book were really fascinating, even though they were just kind of plopped out as facts. This book could have done a much deeper, much better analysis, honestly. It's kind of a thriller. Didn't really execute the thriller in a way that was the most impactful. This book also has a lot of flashbacks to Robin and Cecilia's, is it Celia or Cecilia? Their childhood, them growing up. Ellie is the bride, or Bridezilla, which this book also like touches upon that whole thing. But Ellie has decided to marry the most awful man of the century because the app that she's on is like, hey, you're approaching rottenness. And so Ellie really descends into this madness of, oh my god, I need to get married. Society is telling me I need to get married. My worth as a woman is based on if I am married, if I have children. And so basically the app just matches you up, asking you these like very ridiculous private questions, like how many children do you want, when do you want them, just kind of all this stuff to make sure you get matched with a person who has the same ideals as you as quickly as possible, so you can get married as quickly as possible, so you can spend that money as quickly as possible and become a nuclear family in the American dream. So the book follows the clashes of Robin and Ellie because Robin doesn't want to be there. She ultimately accepts the role of maid of honor so that she can use it for her PhD research. Ellie, on the other hand, is succumbing to this craze that is happening in this future, very close future US, where people have started to do all these weird wedding charms, very much reminiscent of like what, you know, some people decide to do at their wedding, that maybe there's like different traditions you do. Maybe people release doves, maybe they have, you know, sparklers, maybe, you know, the whole thing where the groom takes the garter thing off of the leg in front of everyone. But things in the future have gotten much more sinister, and there's now different things that you can do to ensure a lasting relationship and the best wedding ever. A lot of these things in the book may seem far-fetched, like there's some things go as far as like ritual sacrifice, dig up graves of recently buried wives so you can steal their hair and stuff like that, but I think it's really not far off in my opinion, and I really like that aspect of the book, but overall it just kind of went off the rails for me. It just kind of presented scenarios without really diving deep into them. Robin was insufferable. Ellie was insufferable. It made the whole listening experience really bogged down. It just wasn't great though. It just wasn't great. It had all of the ingredients to make it good, but it got left in the oven for way too long. For my Latin American lit course, I read The President. Series is The President. This was great. I finished it and I was like, oh, wow. It was a book I really had to sit with, and then I had to write an essay on it, and having to delve into it in a much deeper way made me appreciate it so much more, which is what I love about studying literature. You get kind of those opportunities. So this is set in an unnamed Latin American country, but it is essentially Guatemala, and we do follow the reign of terror of one of Guatemala's dictators in the early 1920s. Very horrifying, very violent, like extremely violent. The book opens with a band of homeless people who are all, you know, getting ready for their night on the cathedral porch of a church, and a general from the army comes up to one of the homeless people who's called the Zany. People have discovered that if you talk about the Zany's mother in front of him, he goes into like a fit. He becomes quite violent, and people do it all the time to tease him, harass him relentlessly. And so when this general comes up and he starts talking about this guy's mother, the Zany loses it, plucks his eyeballs out, and kills him. From there, this one event basically spirals the plot of the rest of this book. The president of Guatemala is a very fearsome figure. He's basically never seen. He's like, we are going to use this to our advantage. He is like the master of deception. Nothing is real. Nothing becomes real in the society because truth is just whatever the government makes it. And he's like, you know what? It wasn't this homeless man who killed this general, who was one of his generals. We're going to say that it was these two people who I don't like and who I essentially want out of Guatemala. I just need an excuse to exile them or execute them, and that's what we're gonna do. So the book follows so many people being tortured. It's just a long litany of people being tortured for information, and whenever they give this information, if it's not the information that the torturers want, that's too bad. You follow so many different people in this book, but one of the central plots follows Angel Face, who is the president's favorite. He's like his favorite general. He does tons of missions, tons of deception on behalf of the president. When he's tasked with kidnapping the general's daughter, the general that the president wants out of the country, things go awry because Angel Face is called like Lucifer, who's called the devil, who's called Satan. He falls in love with the general's daughter, and he's like, oh, maybe my whole life is wrong. The essay that I wrote is on one of the women in the story. She is the wife of someone, and when her husband like tells her the plot of something that is happening, she tries to warn the general of what's about to happen, and she's arrested because she's at the general's house. She's taken into prison, and ultimately her wish, like her whole storyline becomes her represented as a living tomb. Like, she's no longer a human being. She is a graveyard. She's a tomb. She is a resting place for the dead. She was the person that I wrote about in my essay, but overall really good. I really feel like I don't want to give this a rating. I don't know. I just feel like it doesn't need a rating. It is what it is, and I would highly recommend. I would recommend a different edition than this though, because the print is so tiny. It's so tiny that it hurts. So that is The President. Really glad I got to read this because I'd never heard about it. I had 2 volumes of manga. I really got back into manga in April. Fantastic time. Okay, so the first one that I read, this one I bought on your recommendation, so thank you so much. And that is Alharu Bride, Volume 1 by Io Sakisaka. Just sweet. It was just sweet. Not necessarily a new favorite, but I feel like for me it was still a really solid read. It's very sweet, it's very nostalgic. The manga opens in junior high. We're following our girl Yoshioka. It's with her and her classmates playing cops and robbers? Isn't it Cops and Robbers? Which brought back so many memories. Playing cops and robbers in elementary school. That game was so much fun. That game was so much fun. So many fond memories of like girls being like, oh my god, I really like this guy because like he's the fastest runner truly simpler times. Whoever was the fastest in your grade was the person you had the biggest crush on. Like, those were just the rules. Shioka basically just hates all of the boys in her class because they're immature, they're loud, they're awful, they're not very nice to her, except for one boy named Tanaka, who is different, and you kind of follow their, I don't know, just their connections in junior high. Unfortunately, he moves away over the summer, and she is like crushed. She's crushed by this. It's just like so sweet. It's like so pure. I don't know, it just felt so nostalgic for me. And then eventually when you get to high school, it ends up that they go to the same high school, but Tanaka has completely changed. Like, you can tell something has happened in his life in the years they've been separated, and he's a completely different person. And she's trying to like be like, where is the old Tanaka? Like, where is the person? Where's the little boy from elementary school? Like, what happened to you? Overall was just okay. I wasn't in love with the art style. It's pretty simplistic. If you guys think I should keep going with it, I definitely want to try a few more volumes to see if like this is one I would be ultimately interested in continuing on with. So that is Alharu Bride. My 5-star read of the month is Arya. Oh my god, it's Arya. I love this. This is Arya Volume 1, and this is by Kazuya Amano. Something is legit in my eye. It's been in my eye for like this whole video, and I've been trying to ignore it, but it's hurting. It's the best manga I've read in a really long time. I'm so happy I found this. I got this thrifted in Nova Scotia. I think this was also a recommendation from you guys. Thank you so much. So Arya is set on the planet Aqua, which is Mars, but it's no longer called Mars. Mars is now the planet of like water everywhere, more than Earth, because we found out how to terraform Mars, but we messed up. We melted all of the glaciers. So we flooded Mars. And now everyone kind of gets around on gondolas. That is the main mode of transportation. So you follow Akari, who has come to Mars because she dreams of being a gondolier. And she's currently in training to become like a full-fledged gondolier. It's called Arya because Arya is the company that is training these gondoliers. And you just follow her living with her other friends who are also training to become gondoliers, and it is so wholesome. I was looking for the most wholesome thing, and I found it. This was a balm to my soul. This is so sweet. You follow her being like a water taxi, a gondolier, for people who just want to get from one place to the other. You follow her training. You follow her like visiting different places around the planet because she lives in Neo Venice, which means that, yeah, she lives in Neo Venezia, which is a replica of Venice on Mars. So you have like all of this Venetian history transported to Mars. Technology is also, I think, like 100 years behind Earth's technology, so you have to do everything by hand. It's so sweet. I smiled like an idiot reading this one, and that's how you know like it's so good. And the artwork is so detailed, so stunning. I want some of these spreads like on my wall. It's just gorgeous. It's so sweet, and I cannot wait to read more. Unfortunately, this seems to be a very hard manga to find. I've been looking in a lot of places and I haven't been able to find volume 2, so I had to give this 5 stars because I have absolutely no complaints. I loved it. I ate this up. I never wanted it to end, and I just like fell in love. I want to be a gondolier. She's living my dream. Okay, speaking of 5-star reads, this is my favorite book that I read this month. It's my favorite book of the month, and that's Dance, Dance, Dance by Murakami. Obsessed with this book. I'm obsessed with this book. I don't think it's for everyone, but it was so for me that it was insane. So, first of all, this was a gift from Michael. Michael, thank you so much, because I'm now doing my thesis mostly on Dance, Dance, Dance. So I'm currently doing a thesis for my final semester of uni, and my thesis is about hotels, trauma, transience, tourism, the hotel affecting humanity's spatial relationship. The hotel's formula is space over time. I love hotels. I'm obsessed with hotels. I've always been drawn to hotels. Dance, Dance, Dance is about a hotel. Basically, like if I just had to say basically what this is about, it's about a hotel. The hotel is called the Dolphin Hotel. Dance, Dance, Dance is the 4th novel in Murakami's Rat cycle. You can read them out of order. I would recommend you at least read A Wild Sheep Chase before going into Dance, 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 because A Wild Sheep Chase is number 3. Also the 3rd novel that Murakami ever wrote. I would say you can skip Hear the Wind Sing and Pinball, because those are the two books that Murakami first wrote ever in the history of Murakami. But Dance 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 follows the Dolphin Hotel, which does feature In a Wild Sheep Chase, but it's a completely different place. In a Wild Sheep Chase, the Dolphin Hotel was like run down, kind of in the middle of nowhere, no customers. In Dance Dance Dance, in the logic of late capitalism in the 80s, it's become a mega hotel. It has everything. You never need to leave. It has just been absolutely transformed into this mega city of luxury and waste. And this is where our protagonist goes. He's unnamed. He's now in his 30s. He's divorced. He's working a job that he finds no meaning, no fulfillment in. He is lost. He is wandering. He has the same passivity of David in David Copperfield, but in a way that I'm not annoyed by, that I'm kind of enchanted by, actually. He keeps having dreams about the Dolphin Hotel, and he's like, someone is crying for me in the halls of this hotel. I need to go see what's up. So he gets to the hotel and he's like, oh damn, capitalism. Capitalism has happened. This is like Murakami's study of late capitalism. I would love to know what he thinks of modern day capitalism. What's going on? I would love for him to do like something like Dance Dance Dance, set in 2023. This was wonderful. Whenever I read Murakami, first of all, you're just riding the waves. You're riding the vibes. It is like such a treat. I cannot tell you how happy this book made me. Whenever I read Murakami, I feel lucky to live in a big city instead of depressed by that fact. It seems so magical. It seems like there are endless possibilities and everything. It seems like you want to go out and talk to people and follow wherever these little pathways lead you, because our protagonist is just bounced along the waves of life from one connection to another based on people he meets in the Dolphin Hotel. It seems to be like a void in the Dolphin Hotel, like a warp in the fabric of space and time, where the past is still in the hotel, like the old Dolphin Hotel is still there inside the new hotel. Without spoiling anything, even though there's not much to spoil, you're just along for the ride. I love his writing! I love his writing! He eventually leaves the hotel to go on this mission to reconnect with people and things that he's lost. There seems to be some kind of threat that our protagonist himself could get lost. He could just go missing. Metaphorically, maybe he loses himself, or maybe he literally just disappears. But throughout it all, you do have him commenting on like how much capitalism sucks, what it's doing to people, how soul-sucking it is. It's set in the, is it early 80s, I think? If you enjoy American Psycho, I think you would enjoy Dance Dance Dance. Very different, but there's something there. There's something there very reminiscent of American Psycho. They're both set with the consequences of the boom of the 80s in mind. I ate this up. I never wanted this to be over. I was so upset when this book ended, honestly. I read this very slowly. I read it in airports. I read it in hotels. Yeah. So now I have so much information to go through and write my little thesis about hotels on. Synopsis is really great, so I'll just read you this. High-class call girls billed to MasterCard. A psychic 13-year-old dropout with a passion for talking heads. A hunky matinee idol doomed to play dentists and teachers, a one-armed beach-combing poet, an uptight hotel clerk, and one very bemused narrator caught in the web of advanced capitalist mayhem. This dance, dance, dance! Sorry, I just love it. Okay. Also for my Latin American Lit course, I read Hour of the Star by Clarice Lispector. I've previously read Agua Viva. Oh my god. Clarice is a writer who I find very difficult. I'm not gonna lie, I find her very difficult to read. There's a quote on the back somewhere that like she writes like no one has ever written before, like no one has ever known language before. Her prose is sometimes very difficult to translate or to get behind. Nevertheless, Hour of the Star follows this writer. He is a writer. You could say he's a novelist because he is the one writing Hour of the Star. He is writing about this girl named Macabea. She's very poor. She is hideous. She is beset by like every illness imaginable. She's always hungry. She makes next to no money at her job as a typist. She lives in a very small house with like 4 other people. And so our narrator's like, you know what? She should probably be miserable. Macabea is not miserable. she's free. She's like totally free. But our narrator is so wound up and bound up with Macabea's life that they're at times like inseparable. He declares that like he is the only one who's ever loved her, who's ever going to love her, who's ever going to see her. And it's him basically telling her story, even as like she like kind of breaks free of that story actually. I don't know, electric? I think I said this with Agua Viva. It feels electric, but also very, very difficult, very dense. And I think I'm gonna have a lot of work ahead of me studying this one in my course because I think I am gonna have to write a paper on this. Devastating, really good, and this is a book that I think I'll need to read a million more times. Probably, I feel like every book from Clarice Lispector is probably one you're gonna need to read a million times, but that is Hour of the Star. It's not over yet. I have 2 more books to tell you about. The first one is an audiobook I listened to once again, and that is Made in Korea by Sarah Suk. This is a YA contemporary romance, which is probably the genre I like really stray away from, but I really like this. I give it 3 stars, which is a decent rating. Honestly, I was not involved in the romance in here. I didn't care about the romance, and the book is actually pretty much not super focused on the romance. I would say that's one of the least important parts of the book. If you're looking for a contemporary novel about 2 high school students coming to terms with like who they are, overcoming difficulties, this is kind of for you. I really like this mostly because it's about a skincare business, and I got really invested in the happenings, the business, and the, I don't know, the little economy of this skincare business that our protagonist Valerie runs at her high school. How is she doing this, you may ask? It turns out that her uncle, who works in South Korea, is sending back like samples of skincare products, and she's selling them to her classmates because like, I don't know, it just really felt, I don't know if it was supposed to be satirical, but it really felt to me like it deals with like the insane requirements that scholarships want high school students to have. I remember applying for so many scholarships in high school. My grades were out the window good, but it was like, oh, do you have 600 hours of volunteering experience? What are your extracurriculars like? Do you have a business? Do you work a part-time job? Do you volunteer with all of these charities? And it's like, oh my God, how many things do I need to do outside of my academics, outside of just being a high school student, just being a teenager, trying to exist without doing X, Y, Z. It's not about your academic performance. It's not about whatever. It's about how much can you expend yourself as a human being doing other things. That's kind of what it felt like to me, which obviously I know is not totally the whole truth, but Made in Korea really highlights that because both her and the love interest Wes, who opens a competing business in the high school, and that's kind of where this rivals to lovers thing comes into play. He opens a business selling K-pop merch because his mother works in the K-pop industry, entertainment industry. That's where you see like how insane some of the expectations on high school students are, because like both of their grades are great, but like they're trying to apply for these universities, apply for these scholarships, and literally they're like, oh my God, if I don't have a student-run business, if I don't volunteer, if I'm not a part of every single club ever, you don't meet the requirements for certain scholarships. But like I said, I was really invested in the skincare world. I think it was really cute. I love following Valerie around, doing her little business things. It was fun. It was just fun. And this book does deal with much deeper topics. Wes wants to go to music school. His parents just want him to be a doctor. Huge clash there. Valerie is the younger sister. She's never enough for her family. Her family doesn't take her seriously at all. They just look down on her. Big clash there. And amidst it all, you have Valerie and Wes coming together and learning like, hey, we're not really rivals after all. We should, you know, maybe just be friends. Maybe just kiss a little bit. Who knows? Anyway, I liked it. I liked Made in Korea. It was a fun audiobook experience. So that is that one I would recommend. Okay, and the last book here, because I'm seeing that I have 4 minutes left on my memory card, I finally finished Hotel Lobbies and Lounges, The Architecture of Professional Hospitality, put together by Tom and Anne Massey. I love this. This was so fun. This is a collection of essays and like studies of different aspects of the hotel. And then also the last half of this book is a whole bunch of case studies about different hotels talking about different things. So for example, we have things discussing like the public-private nature of the hotel and the hotel lobby. It's a place where like you know, you're in the public eye, but it's also private because you're going there to fulfill all of your very personal, intimate needs. We have illusion and reality in the lobby. It was just really interesting. Talked about so many things that I'm definitely going to be using in my thesis, and I really enjoyed it. Like, I loved it. Like, this is what I'm so into. I don't know. I could read stuff like this forever and ever, and it's just fabulous. I also learned so much about like the history of different hotels. Yeah, how things develop, the styles of different hotels. Talks about hotels in film and media. The rise of super hotels in America. It talks about the palace-like hotels in Europe, and overall had a fantastic time. And then we do have case studies which are more about the architecture and different features of the hotel, which are also really interesting to me. So I just love hotels, man. I'm so excited about this thesis. So that's finally, I think, everything I read. Well, everything I can tell you that I read in April. Holy moly. So okay, I'm gonna blow this out now. That's everything I read. Thank you so much. If you made it to the end of this video, leave me a little... Is there a blue flower emoji? I don't think so. Okay, maybe just a book emoji. But thank you so much for watching. Let me know what your favorite read of April was. I've been like in a reading mania recently, and I'm having like the best time ever with it. So yeah, that's what I read. I'll catch you in my next video. Thank you for existing. Ciao.